Kathy, I'm just so excited to chat with you for one, regardless of wherever this conversation goes. You've been a um, just a gentle, kind, um, positive spirit that I've connected with through social media. So I feel really honored and grateful to have you here and have a real live conversation with you today on the things that you are. I'll call it an expert. I hope that word's not intimidating, but expert in, and also so uh, deeply connected in the community. And for those of you who don't know Kathy, this we're going to talk a lot today about grief and grief care, and how maybe that overlaps with some of the nuances of financial services. But more than anything, Kathy, I know Mark and I want to hear your story of how you got here. Does what does a path look like to get into the seat that you are in today?
Yeah, I don't know
Um,
that anybody would connect grief expert and counselor with PE teacher, but it would be worth
yeah,
a conversation.
yeah. So let's make sure we plot those and connect those dots, and then hopefully, and then I say hopefully, but also know this conversation's just going to fill out wonderfully in every other way too. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm just humbled by everything you just said, and I'm excited for this conversation. And um, I appreciate what you're doing and the light you're putting in this world, and you're truly helping people in their darkest times. So, thank
Mm,
you.
So there's some overlap there. All right, well, let's jump back. You can start wherever you'd like, but let's take a big leap back to Kathy. And maybe that's high school, maybe that's even younger. How as you were growing up, where you grew up.
Or maybe you
What
just
are
want to
some
start with flunking out of college. That's always fun.
things about your life? Mark wants to know that story, I'm sure.
Hey, man, I'm a three-time loser. I got it.
Okay, yeah, we might as well start there.
Okay.
Okay, so I have always been the C minus queen. I always did just enough so that I could play athletics. Okay. In
Okay.
high school, I knew I had to maintain at least a C,
Mm,
borderline C average so that I could get to play in Friday night's game. Um, I I grew up in a tiny little town in Montana. My dad was a basketball coach, and my mom, stay-at-home mom. We're just like that Hoosiers of the world. That's how I grew up,
the real life. Yeah.
and I didn't like school. I didn't like to learn. I didn't. I was too much. It was too much fun. With my friends and doing all those things, and so that really that that whole thing of flunking out of college um, was a big changing point to me
Mm,
because it caught up with me.
mm,
The fact that I didn't like to learn, I didn't know how to learn. Um, in college, you can't fake that anymore. And I was, like so many people, we go back and forth of like, what do we want to do? I was like, sports medicine. I was fashion merchandising. I was business. You don't know what you want.
yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, that's is really why, you go to an ice cream store, they don't just have chocolate and vanilla. There's a whole bunch of things in life that you can do. So I had a hard time deciding, but that was really a wake up call.
Mm,
And I took a semester off. I moved to Arizona because it was the only warm place in the world that I could be because it was so cold in Montana. And what I learned real quick is I need a college degree
mm.
and I want a college degree. And so I went back to school and I never got less than an A, ever. From then on, I feel like education and learning, it's so much about readiness. I wasn't
Mhm,
ready. I
mhm.
didn't want it. I didn't have a passion. And so, I
Mark,
went back to school
Mark, would you
and
agree?
Yes, 100%. And I would also add in that, you know, as an ADHD person, you can be ready, but still not have the skills.
Hmm.
So there's a combination. And then I know this from a lot of my work. The great majority of people drop out because of money, actually. So there's a combination of A, you have to be mentally ready and motivated, like any hard thing to do. And B, you have to have some tools. Um, and then C, you have to be able to afford it.
Hmm.
Because any one of those things can put so much stress in you that you just fail out.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember my dad saying, which my parents, rock stars. I mean, I hit the lottery when I was born with
Mm.
these two as parents. And I can remember my dad sitting me down after this happened. He says, "Look, I'm going to help you, whatever you want to do, but you have to choose something. We're not trying this, we're not trying that anymore. You have to make a choice." And it was the best advice, hard to hear, that I had to make a choice. And I mean, I've loved sports and athletics and games and all of that my whole life. And so I knew it had to be in somewhere in that realm.
Yeah.
And it's so funny now because, the last, 17 years of my teaching career, I have taught at the university level, training athletic coaches and PE teachers, and people are like, who knew me back in my early days, they're like, "She's a professor? That cannot be. No, she no, she was never good at school. That's not the same person, no." So it's quite comical how it's not how you start a race, it's how you finish.
Yeah.
And I've loved everything I've done in my life. I don't regret a day because it made me who I am.
Yeah. That's a wonderful thing to be able to look back and say.
That's a very powerful statement, too,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because we all have places where, maybe we didn't do as well as we wanted to, or would look backwards and say, I could have done that better, or boy, did I screw that up. But if you look at it as a way as it was all part of the journey that led you to where you are, it's a different lens.
And you're right. Your parents we're going to give them gold stars.
Yes.
Because it's her story to tell one day, not mine. But it is tough for my 17-year-old as well with school. And she doesn't have a passion for generic learning. It needs to be connected with something that matters to her. And he has to have a compelling reason pulling her forward. So high school's been tough, still tough. We're going to make it, but it's just tough. And as a parent, it's been really, really hard to figure out how to support and help and be there for her, let her choose her path, and also the anxiety and the worries. So all that to say, gold stars for your parents to come alongside you and for you to be able to say you know, they were your rock during that situation. When you decided to go back to school, how old were you?
I was 25.
Okay. Okay. So there was a gap, quite a bit of a
Oh,
gap.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
You took more
Yeah.
than a semester off.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the story of the story. I spent a lot of time in college switching majors.
Mm.
And so I probably could go back for 4 semesters and have 5 degrees, basically, at this point. Um, it took me 7 years to get a bachelor's degree. I mean, literally, when they called my name, my dad stood up and said, "Hallelujah." And,
I love
um,
it. Yeah.
and, but you know what? Everything I've done has helped me really associate with the struggler. I am the struggler. I'm a scrapper. I can relate to that person that has nothing to do with smarts. It's about readiness, finding what you love, taking your skills and talents and channeling them into something. And I fell in love with teaching. I fell in love with pedagogy, the art of teaching, how to ask questions, how to give feedback that motivates change, how to be great at classroom management that's not discipline that harms people. You know, I just fell in love with that, and I relate that to parenting, to my current business, all those skills that I can tease out of my background um, has been really valuable to me. I mean, one of my first teaching jobs, I taught elementary physical education. Okay, I taught 10 30-minute classes a day of children. I mean, if you don't get real quick at cues, directions, teaching fundamentals, you know, they don't get enough touches on the ball and they don't learn.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like, you know, if you're teaching reading, you don't give one book to a whole class. Every kid has a ball and we're learning. And so I could never go back and do that now. You do those jobs when you're young. But I really enjoyed the beginner, that beginner's mindset. There's something pretty special when you see a child learn how to catch a ball and not be afraid of the ball for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I do now, when I help people become more grief literate and get comfortable in the language of loss, we're beginners. We were never taught that. And we could be seasoned professionals, and we shy away from this skill because we think, oh, you know, I don't want to begin again. I don't want to start over. Well, it's just tweaking the language to connect and have conversation with the current people that you are working with.
So, you know, Kathi, that's a super interesting statement. I was just thinking about this. I mean, my dad was almost 101 when he died. And we see this with lots of people that, you know, as we age, we see plenty of loss in our life, and yet you lose one of your parents, and it's this, you'd never expect it. It's like, how could you not expect it? We all die. But your brain's just not wired that way.
No.
I mean, you know, when you're 60 and your mom is 90 and she dies, you shouldn't be surprised by that. But yet we are, and we don't know how to cope with it. And it's like, it's interesting way how the brain functions. You've gotten yourself into a really cool spot.
Yeah. Kathi, what was your first experience with grief in this way that led you to think, I can gather these skills that I have together and use them in this way? You know,
I really had a wonderful childhood and, you know, college age, you know, all of those things. I really think the first time I ever experienced loss really was when my husband came home and we found out he had a brain tumor. You know, I was like 34 at the time. And, you know, I'd seen friends have grief and friends lose a parent, but it never really hit home until it just put me on the floor. I mean, grief is like the worst dodgeball game you've ever experienced. You never can get up and out of the game. And
every time you get up, you get hit with the ball.
You get hit. You will never, it's just so difficult. And, you know, just to touch on a little bit of my story with John, you know, John, my husband, kindest person you've ever met. I mean, everybody loved John. And I dated really a lot of losers and a lot of people. We all did, right? Who doesn't have that story?
Nah, I only dated winners. But they didn't date me.
We always have the running joke in our house. We're like, when one of our kids says, you know, oh, I have a girlfriend. And they're like, well, does she know that?
Right?
um, anyway, nicest man. And um, I married him, and he had 3 little kids. And I wouldn't have cared if he had 10. It just, I knew the minute I met him. And when we had 2 more, so I got my starting 5. And after, he got diagnosed with brain cancer, that's a whole different type of loss and fear and uncertainty, and it changed our lives. Um, and he fought it for 5 years. And I always say I lost him twice because we weren't the same at diagnosis and then at the end. Um, and then facing, having to raise children and a blended family and thinking I'm never going to see my older 3 stepkids again. And, because you don't have a lot of rights when you're a step parent. And, long story short, I had the gift of getting to raise all 5 of them.
Mm.
And what a blessing. I feel like I'm here for that reason. And I think what I'm most proud of is that all 5 of my kids, they have college degrees, they're happy, they're contributors to their community, and they are each other's best friends.
Mm.
I mean, John didn't teach me how to die, he taught me how to live. And I feel like it just gave me a lot of purpose that we're here for an instant, and let's make whose ever life we're in touch with a little better, a little kinder. And that really started that track of what could I do with my experience and my skills. This has been brewing for the last 20 years. It's been 20 years since John died, and it feels like yesterday. Even though I've moved forward, I have a wonderful relationship with a lovely man. It's still, love and grief are very, very similar.
Thank you for sharing that. We went,
Thank,
we just
thank you.
plunged right into that. So I appreciate your willingness to do that.
Well, it's
Well,
one of the wonderful things, right? Your ability to just express that. And I mean, I would think that for those folks that you're working with, and I know you spend a lot of time teaching advisors like us, how to help people with grief, your ability to just lay that out and with no shame, with no, not putting anything around it. It's just, this is something you experience, right? How immensely powerful for us as advisors to others to be able to do that and just give people the trust and confidence to say, look, just lay it out however you feel. It's all okay.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I think there could have been a lot of people that I could help. I did some widow coaching, and I did, this and that of trying to help people who are divorced or experiencing loss. And what I really found was that I really like helping professionals, companies, people who normalize these conversations and make these people who are experiencing grief feel less isolated. Because, I mean, think about it. Everybody likes to say their story of how they met their spouse, and we get in these conversations. But telling my story in a social setting is going to be a big old plate of awkwardness. And you know and why, just because people experiencing loss, why can't they tell their story? I have the fairy tale.
They need to tell their story more than anybody.
Exactly.
Right? Having it bottled up inside of you is the worst awful thing.
The loneliness, and then what I'm hearing you say that I think is maybe really just coming to light for the first time for me is the reason that people don't share is because within the context of a community, the things that you do share are the things that you believe other people can relate to. And, and we can talk back and, we can have this conversation back and forth. Oh, this is what we did when we got married. That's what you do when this is how it felt when I had my first kid. That's how it felt when you had your first kid. And this awkwardness is that I'm sharing something that most likely no one else in the room can relate to. And so therefore I'm less inclined to share. They're less inclined to ask. And that isolation is happening not because anybody's trying to do that, but because they don't know how not to do that. And it's a skill to
Exactly.
figure out how not to do that.
Exactly. And that's what I teach. I teach people how to connect best with communication to grieving people, because people, even if you've been widowed, when I meet another person and they share that they were widowed, I don't tell my story. My job is to listen, to ask questions, to open up some stories. I'd love to hear about them. I want them to tell me their name, and I want to know all about them.
Mm-hmm.
I can connect in some emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and we can have that ping pong back and forth of the emotions, but I'm not going to tell you that I lost my husband. I mean, that whole comparative suffering, mine is bigger than yours, and there's like some hierarchy of loss that one is more important than the other. The only loss that matters is your loss, the
Well, and
person
isn't
who
it
you
true,
shared it.
Kathy, that isn't it true that everybody has it, that everybody has it? I mean, we could meet another woman named Kathy who lost her husband when the husband was age 40 to a glioblastoma, right? But would have a completely different feeling about it. Isn't that true?
It is
I mean,
true.
I was mad when my mom died.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't
Well,
grieving. I
yes.
was mad. And there's a long story behind that. My mom was an alcoholic. She was never present in my life. I never had a mother. And I was pissed about the fact that I never had a mom. People are asking me if I miss her. I was like, miss her? Are you kidding? I'm glad she's gone, but I'm mad. And that's a hard thing to say in public.
But it's your truth.
It is my truth. That's why I was thinking it's got to be, and I don't, you're the professional here. You're the grief smart professional to bring your business out. But I was thinking it has to be that everybody's just different. Everybody's experience is completely different.
It's like your
So
thumbprint.
talking about yours is you can't relate to them even if you've experienced
No.
the same thing, because you
No.
haven't experienced the same thing.
No. You want to relate in the emotions. If they're talking about being mad, or times they were mad, or being uncertain, or I'm really frightened, or and you start having these conversations, and you start pulling out an emotion,
Mm-hmm.
and then they talk longer, they tell the story longer,
Yeah.
and you have deeper connection.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we want?
Yeah. Something like, well, I when I'm mad, the first thing that I want to go do is blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
and let them respond back to how they react to anger. Maybe it's different, maybe it's the same,
Mm-hmm.
but we both experience the emotion of anger.
Yeah.
And that can
And
create some of those connective tissues to that conversation about a subject that you may not have any experience with.
it's all about listening to learn.
Yeah.
And tugging at those
Good
emotions,
phrase.
listening for where those feelings are, and digging deeper. Because if you want change, or if you want to be heard, or if you want your advice to be heard, it's not the cognitive side, it's not the physical side that we do, it's the affective side of the feelings, emotions, character that we're building together. That's what promotes change. I mean, I taught sports psychology for years, and it's that piece that creates the intrinsic motivation to change. So it's just really interesting. And we just don't think about it. And there's so many just mainstream things we say, do you have kids? Are you married? There, yeah, I would want to know that, but maybe this young couple that I just met, maybe they're experiencing infertility. Maybe they do not want children. Maybe, we don't know that. And so maybe saying, I'd love to know more about you, or tell me about your family or where you grew up or anything. Then people can add what they feel comfortable adding based on the relationship that we are just starting.
Right. It's more a function of what is it about you that I need to know in order to help you the most?
Right.
Right. Not what I think or the standard stuff that we ask.
The standard
Because everybody's
questions.
different.
Kathi, I'm just there's 1,000 things I want to ask you. And we could spend hours. I know, even if Mark dropped off, even if he couldn't hang, you and I could spend hours. And at the same time, I want to leave people a little curious at the end of this conversation to come find you and ask those questions that I bet they have after listening to this conversation too. So tell me this in the next 2 minutes as we close. Tell me, one, where are you going next? What are you doing next? And then B, who do you typically work with? Who reaches out? Who do you connect with? How do you connect with them? Where can people find you? Not just social media, but like what's the best way to get into these conversations with you if they're thinking, I'm curious and I want to know more.
Okay.
So what's next, and how do we get connected with you?
Okay, thank you for those questions. First thing, what I'm working on now, I am creating a podcast. I'm learning from you all right now in this current one.
This is going to be so
And
good.
I want it really to be about grief communication. Really, what are we doing in the empathy vein to support people and make people feel less alone? And I think it will be great for professionals, for individuals, for corporations, for HR, for financial. It's that art of connection in the worst of scenarios.
Yeah.
And
I think you're so brave, and I'm so excited about this. I love it.
I think it goes back to my history in, sports, games, and play. Play is about imagining and being curious and wonder. It's not about putting a ball in somebody's hand. It's how we think. And there's so many ways that we could help people with our language and our questions and our body language and how to help them, what to give them, all those things. And so I look at it as like, this is life's playing field. And we need everybody on board here to support the ball carrier right now. And so that's really exciting because I can sit in a room and talk to myself and be as witty or weird as I am. The other thing is I work a lot with financial professionals just because, clearly they have skin in the game, right?
Yeah.
You've heard of the numbers, all of that. Clients are leaving you because you can't be emotionally present or empathetic or communication, whatever. Well, either they're leaving you, but where are they going? They've got to go somewhere. So why don't you be the company that really hones in on becoming grief smart and championing them,
Well, it's a whole nother aspect of behavioral finance and a really important one. There are incredibly strong links here between what you do and what we do as behaviorally aware financial professionals.
Absolutely.
Which I think is the change in the business, right? It's no longer about what rate of return can you drive on somebody's money. It's can you get the right financial behaviors from them so that they're lifetime successful? And this is a piece of it.
Yes.
Because we're all going to experience grief at some point, unless we're, call it lucky, call it unlucky, but the first one to ever go.
It's true. And in these conversations, this is where trust is solidified.
Yeah.
And you can show up in the darkest times. Yeah. The best place to find me on my website, kathibalasek.com. You can email me, Kathi@kathibalasek.com. So, really stretching out there.
Kathi with an I.
Kathi with an I.
There's something about making it easy that is quite useful.
It's, it goes back to basic fundamentals. This is a basic human need to be with people, to be understood with people, by people, and to care about people. It's not rocket science. Um,
It's
it's just,
not,
yeah,
and it does require a genuine concern and deep
Yeah.
desire
But you
it
to
raise
does.
build those skills.
you raise an incredible point. I mean, I know you're a basketball nut. I know you a little bit, and a golf nut, and I'm both of
Yes.
those things. You can't hit the hook that Bubba Watson hit at the Masters out of the trees until
Yeah,
you know how to hit a straight shot. You can't.
exactly.
And so the fundamentals, you got to get good at them, and you can teach us the fundamentals and then help us develop the advanced skills so that we can help our clients when they need it the most.
Yeah.
What a valuable thing to do. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it. And it's just a joy to know you both.
Thank you, Kathi.
That is super kind.